We're actually going to kick off, and I'm going to kind of open our show tonight with speaking to a question that Anna had emailed in. Really, and I think it's kind of related to the two agenda points that we had in the email that we sent today. Your customer experience being a competitive advantage for your brand. And if you nail customer onboarding and implement some good customer marketing techniques, you can really drive new demand from your customer base while also shoring up retention. So you all know me, you know, my background in sort of customer experience, customer success. So wanted to kind of take that angle tonight and talk a little bit about how all of that plays into both brand and demand marketing. Anna sent in several questions around this, so I'm going to try and kind of tackle it in my little opener here, but we'll check in with you, Anna, to make sure I covered it. What's up, David K? Good to see you. Katie. All our friends are diving in. All right. So I was thinking about this topic, oh yeah, Chris did go on vacation. It's a well-deserved vacation. He's living it up in Mexico. So taking a step back, I was thinking about this topic for a while. Actually, Anna sent in the question a couple of days ago, and it's been kicking around in my head, thinking about sort of the angle that I wanted to take and expressing my point of view here. I think that before I get into some of the tactical stuff on the customer onboarding side and how that can generate referrals for new business, just talking about how designing an exceptional customer experience can define your brand as a company. And as a marketer, I feel like with the silos that exist today with marketing and sales and customer success, I don't know if marketers have enough influence over the customer experience to help influence and drive those types of brand building activities, and really capitalize on this really important milestone in the journey to really surprise, delight, impress, deliver on your promise so that your customers become your advocates and they do your marketing for you on your behalf. A company that when I was on a customer support team earlier on in my career, I read the book on Zappos. You guys know that book. They're like very well known for their amazing customer support team, their amazing customer experience. Amazon bought them, wildly successful. I think even they had this thing with their employees that a few months in, they would tell their employees, like, I'll give you $5,000 if you want to walk out the door. Like, do you want to stay working here or do you want this $5,000? And that would be an aha moment in the employee experience of, no, I really want to stay working here instead of taking this like chunk of money. I think that's a really bold move that shows how confident they are in their culture. And I think they really embraced taking care of their employees and knowing that that was the first step in taking care of their customers. And the stuff that Zappos did to take care of their customers and like kind of create that brand marketing, that brand affiliation, none of it was rocket science. Like all of it, when I was kind of like thinking through and making my list of what they did, it was all really simple things, but simple things that a lot of companies don't do today. And even I had this experience the other day. Like one of it is just like easy to find contact information on your website. I was trying to call a company, I won't call them out, but I could not find a phone number or an email address to contact them. I just kept being redirected to their help center. Okay, Matthew, it was Gusto, like the HR system. I found out if I selected like, you know, the third prompt from the second dropdown on the contact us page, and then the subsequent dropdown menu selected the fourth option, and then the subsequent dropdown menu selected the second one, then I could give my phone number to get a call back. But I couldn't actually get a phone number. So, you know, that is a simple thing, but like make it easy for your customers to reach out to you. So much is like, let's make it self-serve. Let's keep our support team as small as possible. Let's do what's in the best interest of the company, not what's in the best interest of the customer. Empowering your customer-facing team to solve problems how frustrating is it when you're dealing with something, honestly, B2B or B2C? I know Zappos is B2C, but this plays on both sides, where I'll ask my manager, I'll talk to them, I'll let you know, I'll get back to you. Empowering your frontline teams to solve the problem, make it right, provide a really good experience so that customer is ready to tell their friends, order your shoes on Zappos because it's super easy, it's amazing. And if you order the wrong pair, you can return it for free. They're not going to try and upsell you. They'll pick up the phone, they'll help you when you need it. It's that 24/7 support, the no scripts, the no phone trees, free shipping, no upselling, just all of this basic stuff. We've talked about this before on the show of taking stuff from B2C, applying it to B2B. This is a great example of that in the customer experience, customer support realm. So I think it's just, my takeaway for all of the demand marketers on the show tonight is really, how can you influence or collaborate with your customer success or customer support counterparts and really have a hand in what that customer experience looks like? It is directly connected to and related to what your brand reputation is. And I believe as a marketer, you have the authority, the responsibility to be part of that conversation and to know what's going on, to have people listen to what you have to say, to point out areas for improvement, to suggest opportunities to enhance and make the experience even better. And so I know customer support can be sort of on the day-to-day, maybe the less sexy side of the business, but this is what your customers are experiencing. And when they're calling your support line or when they're complaining to their customer success manager, this is your opportunity to surprise, delight, impress, and wow them. And if you do that well, they are going to tell their friends that they had an amazing experience, because unfortunately the norm, especially in B2B, is having a less than stellar experience or a bad experience. So it's an opportunity to stand out that maybe not everybody focuses on, given that it's sort of technically in this other department. Seeing some questions.
Yeah, Megan, I have a question for you here from David K.
Yeah.
He brought up the good point that a lot of times customer success or retention rolls up to sales. So as a marketer, you can feel a little bit removed or set apart from actually influencing the customer experience. Can you talk a little bit about how, as a marketer, you can overcome that if it is rolling up to a sales team versus marketing?
Yeah, for sure. And, I think in my experience, I've seen, and I personally as a CS leader rolled up to sales. So I've seen that structure. Sometimes they're equal partners, marketing, sales, success. But I think in that regard, it becomes part of the broader collaboration with sales that you have to have regardless. We've talked a lot about marketing and sales alignment in past episodes, and that's super important. And obviously, as you're generating leads, you want to make sure that they're being handled correctly, from the sales side to actually acquire the customer. But so much more happens after that. And so, honestly, I think all of this comes down to really creating an environment in a company where everybody actually feels that they're on the same team. I think the problem that exists in so many companies today is because of conflicting goals or incentives that are in place. People don't feel like they're on the same team. People feel like it's, sales against marketing, it's customer success against sales. And it creates and inhibits proper collaboration on these things. There are people that try to claim ownership of parts of the customer journey. And, at the end of the day, no one department owns the customer. We all are working in service of the customer. And it takes someone that's willing to sort of take a stand and work to create those bridges between the teams. And the only time I've really seen this work successfully is either there's a really strong leader that forces it and has the authority to make it happen, or there's a leader or two that are very adept at understanding the other's point of view and putting in the effort to work together. I think one thing that I've done in the past is tell the sales leader or the CEO or whoever, why don't you shadow a customer support person for an hour? Why don't you see what customers are writing in about, calling in about? Why don't you see how we handle it? Do you like what you see? Is there room for improvement? It's always fascinating when you put executives or leaders on on the front lines of the support team. They're always shocked, surprised, they had no idea. So that can be a good tactic to open their eyes on why it's important to focus on this. Switching gears a little bit, Anna asked a lot of questions around, how do you think about customer onboarding? How do you think about how, customers can refer new customers? But in order for that customer to refer a new customer, they need to be a happy customer. So how do you onboard them? How do you make them happy? How do you deliver value, deliver outcomes to them, and get them to a point where they're talking about your brand, that they want to refer their colleague to your company? And it's not easy to do. I've brought this up before, this sort of framework, like the customer journey framework. And I really believe there's like 6 phases to it. You have awareness, you have acquisition, you have onboarding, you have retention, you have growth, and you have advocacy. We talk a lot about awareness. It's a lot of the work that we do on the marketing side, on the demand gen side. Acquisition is clearly sales and making sure that that handoff is seamless and smooth. And then once you get to onboarding, pretty much everything else after that is usually customer success, account management, customer support. Poor onboarding is 100% the leading cause of churn. Your onboarding is your first impression, maybe your third first impression. Maybe they had, you make an impression with your marketing, they talk to a salesperson, but now they've committed. They've said, I'm going to work with your company. Now you have to nail it. You have to nail the onboarding. And it's difficult to do. Typically it fails because people don't put in the effort and the time to make it seamless and successful. So one key is you need to have the proper information transfer between the sales team and the customer success team. You should never have the customer repeating something that they've already told the company. It's one of the most frustrating things that they can experience. You obviously want to sell to the right customer so that we're not trying to serve poor fit customers in the process. When you think about what that onboarding experience looks like, it's really important to be intentional about what happens in the first 90 days. I think onboarding is a 3-month cycle. Regardless of your product, the technical part or the setup, maybe that happens faster, but I think you have a 3-month runway to really make an impression and begin to deliver value for that particular customer. The actual onboarding meeting is really important. The follow-up is super important. And it's not just their interaction with the customer success person that matters. What is the interaction with the product? What is the interaction with the service? Are they getting any onboarding, nurturing emails that the customer marketing team has put together? Do the steps that they have to take in order to get value from your product, are they easy? Are they hard? Do they have the time to put into that? And so when you think about designing that onboarding process, how can you minimize the amount of work on the customer side? How can you break it up over a period of time to make it easily manageable for them? How can you incentivize them to do those things, not by money, but by explaining and connecting those activities back to the desired outcome that they're trying to achieve? Only when you get a customer through onboarding, through retention, potentially growth if there's upsell potential, getting them to advocacy can take some time. But in an ideal world with a pure mind, you would be pushing them to that advocacy point as quickly as possible so that they would organically refer people. That said, I do think at the 90-day mark, if they've had a good experience, that would be sort of the earliest I would even float out asking for a referral. But you can do that. And I've talked about this a little bit before. You can do it in surveys. You can have the CSM ask. You can do it as part of a webinar or event that they have. Making it an organic ask is always the best practice, but there are ways that you can slide them in and people will respond to it. I've been talking for a little bit, so I'm going to stop. Anna, I tried to broadly address your question, but was there any area that I could dive in a little bit deeper?
I think you did a good job doing a broad, high level, what buckets to think about. I'm thinking about those buckets. I'd be curious if you know of any playbook to look at or something to read. I'm such a reader. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to, and like Zappos, I could read about how they do great customer experience, stuff like that. But is there any playbook out there that you would recommend that just dives into specifics For example, like how do you, sorry, my kids are in the background. They should be in the basement, but they're not. For example, like increasing customer lifetime value, that's a bucket I think about. And what a previous company did was they had the sales team do like quarterly business review meetings so that they would sort of like play that out during that meeting. It was like a set consistent thing that they did. So being very systematic about what you do in each of these buckets. Is there a playbook on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different books out there. And are you specifically speaking about B2B SaaS in general? Or is it more of a services and tech business or services only? Because I think those are the key differences.
Both. And I only say that because I would love to like have this for my own business, but also when I talk to clients, some of them are, you know, they have products and they're SaaS companies. So both would be great.
Yeah. And I think with like when you get really tactical with the onboarding phase, for example, I think the key like tactical components of the playbook are being really prescriptive about what the handoff from sales to success looks like. There needs to be an internal in-person or Zoom conversation with the sales rep and the CSM to pass information along. Like putting things in a CRM isn't enough. So investing in that. Having the handoff call before an onboarding call where you have the sales rep, the CSM, and the customer on the call together, where there's a very warm handoff in the relationship. And then the CSM can set the expectations of what they should expect in the onboarding call. So being really deliberate about that process and investing in the right amount of time. It doesn't have to be a long call. Most customers are happy to provide this amount of time. When you have the onboarding meeting, usually there's a lot to talk about, and sometimes people overload the onboarding meeting and overwhelm their customer. So be really clear. What are the most important things to get out of this meeting? What are the most important expectations that you want to set? What are the most important action items that they need to complete within the first 30 days? And don't go too much further than that. Of course, you want to paint the vision of the end goal, but keep the agenda for the initial onboarding meeting very narrow in scope. I also like to use the onboarding meeting to find out from our points of contact. Tell me more about the organization. How is your organization structured? Who are the other decision makers? Who is your boss? How are you measured by your performance? Find out what's going on with that customer so you have the right context. That's going to help inform everything else. Get contact information. Oh, that's a decision maker. What's their name? What's their title? What's their email address, right? Use the onboarding meeting to learn about the company and understand what's going on while guiding them forward to the next step. The next piece of it is get their commitment to communicate with you on the cadence that you need. Okay, we're going to set up a weekly call. We're going to set up a monthly call. Get that. What happens a lot, especially in like high velocity B2B SaaS companies, is CSMs can't get their customer on the phone. They can't get their customer to meet with them, and then they'll eventually churn. So let's set that meeting cadence up front and commit to a time that works for both sides. And then follow up. So the follow-up is key. So many people don't send a follow-up email after an onboarding meeting. Here's my follow-up. Here are the materials. Here are the action items. This is what I'm going to do. This is what you're going to do. This is when we're meeting next. Like just nail that piece. And then over the course of that first 90 days, you have to deliver on the milestones that you had. You have to hold your customer accountable to what they're supposed to do to move forward in the process, make those dependencies really, really clear. And then the thing that I really like to do, which is challenging, but is possible, is how can you surprise and delight your customer within your first 90 days? One of my favorite stories, I was at a company called Managed by Q, went to an office, visited an office manager. We were doing their cleaning and maintenance, and we're going to paint out their office. And she was showing me a wall with all their new employees. She had Polaroid pictures. And I was like, that's so cool. Tell me about this. Oh, every new employee, we take a Polaroid and we put them on this wall. People love it. My Polaroid broke 2 days ago. I have 3 new hires starting on Monday. I was like, oh, that's terrible. Yeah, I got to find a Polaroid. It's fine. Da, da, da. Got back to the office, ordered her Polaroid camera on Amazon. Next day delivery. She gets it from me the next day, and customer for life, right? Oh my God, I can't believe you bought me a Polaroid camera. That is amazing. I'm like, well, you needed to do your job, right? Yeah. So those are hard, but like listen to the people that you're talking to. And like, that is someone who I did get referrals from and who I was able to lean on for a testimonial. Some of those things, you know, they say do the things that don't scale. That's maybe an example of that. So I won't belabor this. Hopefully that gives you like a little bit more super tactical stuff. Let me take this as a follow-up about maybe some additional materials that I can share with you as well, since you're a reader like me.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Megan. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course. All right. So I think we have some other questions. What do you got, Judy? What do we have?
We've got a lot of questions. So this is coming from, I believe, the other Anna. Is there a balance between self-service and live support? I'm trying to frame the value to my team of creating some self-service content for basic issues.
So you have to have like a help center or an FAQ. Like, that's kind of table stakes, because there are people that really don't like to contact support and that they will want to self-serve. So you have to serve that segment. I often have the customer support team own that help center and own the maintenance and the updating of that. But kind of to the point that I was making at the beginning, you should have your contact information there. Your support team is something that you should over-invest in, not under-invest in. Have the phone number and the email readily accessible. The insights that they can get are just so valuable, and the impact that they have. So, you know, build the help center, allow people to self-serve if they want. I'm a big believer in having both live chat, email, and phone available for all, you know, especially like B2B SaaS companies, for sort of the 3 channels to reach the support team. A lot of people really like live chat. You just got to be on that. People have to respond within, you know, 5 seconds or they'll leave. So you need someone fully dedicated to that particular channel. But I would say you shouldn't be trying to optimize to push people to self-serve. You should be giving the people that want to self-serve the information that they need, but allow people to contact the support team. It's a brand moment that you can influence, I think.
Perfect. We got a string of more questions, so I'm just going to rapid fire them.
Let's do rapid fire, and then we can get to some of the ones that were submitted in advance.
From Ashley, what's the average justifiable wait time for a customer support response? Just curious.
So it's funny, when I was at ZocDoc, our SLAs were crazy. We had to pick up the phone within 8 seconds, 1 ring, and we had to respond to every email within 1 hour. And we had to respond to chat like immediately within 1 or 2 seconds. That was really hard to maintain. I typically say for phone, you ideally are never waiting in a queue. That said, like, I think, you know, 1 to 2 minutes would be the max, but like, I think if you can get them within like the first 3 to 5 rings, that's ideal if you're not getting the first ring. Email, generally, I like to say same day or maybe next day if it's towards the end of the day. Like within 4 hours. Again, the 1 hour is aggressive. And chat is pretty instantaneous. I think it can also depend on like the severity of the issue. You should have some level of triaging where you're handling things that are clearly more urgent, more quickly. And or if you're backed up, have some type of auto response that lets people know that you're going to get back to them on X amount of time. And if they need help faster, that they should call or do something else. So just a couple of rules of thumb, if that helps.
There was a quick follow-up to that I'm just seeing come in chat that says, are live chats meant to be 24/7?
For that, I mean, it depends on the company. Like a company like Zappos, yes. But especially a lot of small startups are not that way. I think it's okay for the chat to not be that way. Typically what I've done is whenever the support line is closed because the team is not there, there is a number that can be called. So there's a number on the voicemail, there's a number on the auto response to email, or there's an actual message in chat that says, you know, live chat is down. For an urgent issue, call this line. And there are ways that you can sort of scalably support an off hours response time as long as your team is large enough. Yeah.
Okay, next question. How do you recommend getting support materials in front of new customers for a SaaS product?
For that. So that's a great question, actually. Typically, part of my onboarding playbook is to also tell the customer, this is how you'll work with our company. And so often, like if you're a customer success manager or an account manager, it's too easy to say, just contact me for anything you need and I'll help you. And so it's actually an opportunity to say, hey, here's our help center. If you like to self-serve, you can access a ton of information here. If you have these types of urgent issues or these types of questions, contact our support line. They're going to get back to you way faster than me. They're the best equipped to help you quickly. If you have questions on your account, on implementation, on these topics, that's where you can call me, and that's where I'm best able to assist. Here's your onboarding packet of materials that I'm going to provide to you. Don't overwhelm them. Customers don't reference materials that often, so just make sure it's available within the product experience in an ideal setting, because they're unlikely to look up an email you sent them before. But setting that expectation of where they can go to get the help that they need at the beginning is helpful. To like add to that, I also like to say things like, I would be irresponsible to tell you that like nothing will go wrong. Something probably will go wrong, but when it does, contact us and we're going to fix it for you. If you set that expectation, the first time something goes wrong, they're not that upset. They're like, oh, Megan told me this might happen. Now I know what to do. Okay, let me resolve this issue. Let me get it fixed.
Cool. Okay, we've got another question from David K. Megan, when would you recommend introducing a new customer to any customer groups? Ooh, what is B, capital B, lowercase o, capital F, S, or all caps SIGs? I don't know your acronyms.
Let's bring you on, David.
Birds of a feather. Birds of a feather.
Okay.
Or special interest groups.
For that. So repeat your
like
question, David.
All your, I don't know, finance folks, perhaps, if you're big enough, versus all your engineering folks, just for example.
For that. Well, sorry, can you start from the beginning, restate it? I didn't quite get it.
It was, when would you recommend introducing a new customer to any of the customer groups? So introducing them to finance, introducing them to any other birds of a feather.
Got it. Like within your internal organization. Oh, you have a question?
No, many times if you have a large customer base, you might have groups of them that have gotten together to help each other. Would you introduce new customers to that directly? Would that be something you would advise to do? Or would you let them just find it on their own?
Got it. So if there's sort of organic communities that have been created, are you introducing that customer? Or are you letting them find it on your own? That's a good question. So, I think in my experience, when I've created different communities, whether it was a Slack group or like an email list or some type of like meetup that would happen back in the day, I would only introduce new customers when I felt really clearly that they'll be well received, they have value to add, this is a good fit. And so whenever you have those types of communities, you do want to be careful because they're typically very special and you don't want to sort of upset the apple cart, if you will. So I have been proactive in the past when I feel very compelled that it is a really good fit. I think I've also taken the approach actually where, especially in a particular community that I was building at Managed by Q with like office managers, if we had some new office managers that joined as customers of ours, sometimes I would do the opposite. I would go to some of the leaders of the community and say, hey, we have a couple of new folks in here. They're new on the job. I can tell that they could really use guidance. Do you feel comfortable reaching out to this person, introducing yourself, welcoming them to the group? So that's also worked really well. But again, it's been very opportunistic or strategic in that this is the right fit. I want to connect these people together. I wouldn't necessarily say I've ever done it in a sort of systemized or process way where like I do that every time. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's how I think about that. For that.
I don't think there's a correct answer. It's just how you're thinking about it that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, we got a couple more questions along the same customer success vein. This is from Jess. What are your thoughts on customer surveys, the balance between having the helpful information and insights versus what does the client get out of it and use up their time?
Yep, for sure. So I like to do surveys usually customer surveys twice a year. You can justify quarterly in some businesses. Keep the survey under 10 questions. Don't expect that people are going to take more than, 10 minutes, ideally 5 minutes or less to complete it. I typically like to include questions that make the customer feel that if they provide information, that their experience will improve as a result of them taking the time to do the survey. So whether it's asking about, what's one thing we could change about the product, if we could do anything to make your experience better, what would that be? Those questions are typically better. I think limiting free response so it's easy to get through it. That said, you want that a little bit because the qualitative feedback is so valuable. And I think for certain things where customer feedback is really critical, like I'll pay customers for product research, for example. And I think I don't think that that's bribing. I think it's like, I want to take an hour of your time and get direct feedback on the product, and I'm willing to compensate you for that. Whether it's an Amazon gift card, a donation to their charity, whatever it is. I think that there are some moments like that where it is worth incentivizing. But otherwise, those are some of my best practices with surveys. I think the other thing to keep in mind is your customer support team. And every time they interact with a customer, they have an opportunity to ask questions. Or your CSMs, whenever they have a quarterly business review or a check-in meeting. So leverage existing interactions that your customers are having and find ways to ask those questions that you would put in a survey to get the information that you want. That's like meeting the customer where they are, which is always a good practice in my book.
Perfect. I got one more in this category. Is it wrong or right to expect your CSM to make strategic or use case recommendations specific to your business? My constraint as a manager of multiple vendors is usually time, and I'm not a product expert, at least at first. Smiley face. This is from Robert.
For that. So this is like Robert, come on the line. We have not had enough audience interaction on this episode.
Hey there.
Can you restate your question for me?
Sure. Thinking about it both as someone who consumes like technology and then, what we can do in our business. I guess like the header here is I have weekly calls with vendors that they're insistent on having. Like they want to, like, let's say I buy a piece of technology and they want to have a weekly call with me, and they're very upset if I don't go to the call or I don't want to be on that weekly cadence.
Got it.
The challenge is usually, it takes a lot of time to do that across multiple vendors. And then my expectation is usually from a vendor, at least at first, to make like sort of strategic or use case recommendations, that require like specific details about our business, not like some stock use cases or stock customer success plays. And then I guess I'm wondering, is that expectation sort of too much of me? And then within our own company, I like it when our customer success reps do that as well. And then the customer success reps, the constraint on their time is that they have, lots of customers that they're managing. So they can't really learn the ins and outs of every business or client that they have.
Yep. It's a great question. Meeting frequency is really interesting because I don't think more meetings mean more value. So a weekly meeting might be too much in a lot of cases, right? Every other week, once a month, once a quarter. One of the things that I've done in leading a customer team is really thinking about customer segmentation and what the needs of those customers are, and not putting everyone in a one-size-fits-all box. So I think that's sort of one part of your question is, and like if you feel like you don't want to be going to a weekly meeting with a vendor, then you shouldn't be doing that, right? And I think you should be able to say, hey, like I'd like to meet monthly, and I'd like to make sure our meetings are like this. Now, I think you make a really good point on how can a CSM or how can a vendor learn enough about the customer's business in order to actually add real value to the conversation and make recommendations that are within the right context, that can be implemented. And I think that's really tough because there's an element of that takes time. So I do think as part of the onboarding process, that's part of it. If you're the CSM and you're working with a customer, you need to understand their business, what matters to the business, how they make money, what their quarterly goals are, what their annual goals are, how they think they're going to get there. You also need to know that about the person you're working with. If you don't know that information, you're not operating effectively within that account. I see it very often that CSMs have way too many accounts for them to actually be able to do this effectively. And that speaks to not investing enough into the function and assuming that it's easier or they don't need as much time. But what I would challenge is, not everything deserves a weekly meeting. Be really strategic about how often that cadence should be. You do need to give time for both the vendor or a CSM to learn enough about the business. And if you're the CSM, how can you make it easy for the customer to give you that information? Or if you're the customer dealing with a vendor, how can you help them get up to speed more quickly so that they can add value to you? Are some of the things that I would be thinking about. And then being really clear on what you expect from them. I think so many times it's just a matter of not communicating what those expectations are, and then they are unmet. And then people are unsatisfied. So saying like, I'm only willing to meet with you if you're able to give me tactical recommendations of how I can use your product to achieve this outcome. If you're not able to provide that to me on a weekly basis, that's okay. Let's adjust the frequency. Or do you not have enough information to provide that to me? Let's fill in the gap so that you can. That's kind of how I would think about tackling that issue, but there's not really a one size fits all across different businesses. Really interesting though. Judy, I think there was a really good process question that was submitted in advance that I was really excited for you to take because you've been instrumental in designing our process. Yep, at Refine Labs. Matthew, it was yours. Why don't Matthew come on and ask your question, and then Judy has created a pretty great process on our side that we're constantly tinkering with and iterating, but ask your question and Judy can share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. Cool. So I'm curious how much systemization you guys build into your team's processes. So I'm just going to read this verbatim. Is it more like guardrails and you move within them, or is it like metered out by the task and there's like a step-by-step to it? And which have you guys found to be the most conducive to success for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, I think probably the first thing Megan and I bonded over when we started working together is our love of process. So we were both excited when we saw you submit this. Also want to thank you for your engagement on all of my LinkedIn posts. That's very appreciated, Matthew. Yeah, so I am totally a process nerd. If I could, I would prescribe everything down to a T, but it doesn't really work that way as much as I wish it would. We have created more along the guardrails system of a framework that people in my role as a director of demand gen use when we're onboarding new clients to move them through kind of a series of phases that we have where we're setting up their foundation and we're launching their initial campaigns. And that part is pretty set. We've got a good process there, but it's not cookie cutter for every client. It depends so much on where a client is at from a sophistication standpoint. What channels are they already running campaigns on? What does their marketing automation and CRM setup look like? We're often dealing with clients who are maybe migrating CRMs or migrating marketing automation. We're helping with some components of that. So those clients look very different than onboarding a new client that has been running paid channels for multiple years, has historical data associated with it. So much to my chagrin, I have not been able to create a completely templatized process, but I think we've found a nice kind of balance between prescribing a general flow and process and then letting directors and account managers use their own intuition and knowledge of marketing and that customer to kind of tweak and refine the process, if you will. Yeah.
No, that was great.
Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think there's a really cool book called Brave New Work, not World, Brave New Work, by Aaron Dingham. And he has this really good analogy. So it's not my own analogy, but so you know how when you drive, there are streetlight controlled intersections. Red means stop, green means go. And then, although I think there are different names for it, we all know what a roundabout is. One of those things where there's no lights, you kind of have to like use your judgment and go through the roundabout. The streetlight controlled intersections are all about compliance. You have to do this, you can't do this. And the roundabouts require people to use their judgment, to pay attention, to take signals from the things that are going on around them to get through it. There are way more accidents in intersections. They're way more expensive to maintain. They require a power grid, all of these things that make them inefficient and actually result in more accidents and more traffic than a roundabout. And so I like to say that's like my analogy of like when I create playbooks or process, I like to create roundabouts and not intersections because you want people to use their best judgment. But you want them to do so within the guardrails that make the most sense. And especially in a services business, there's too many human components to this to control it. I think you can get a little bit more prescriptive when you're dealing with the technology product. But in a services business where you have humans working with humans, you can't control a lot. Just have to surrender to that. Oh, Robert has another question in here. You want to come back on, Robert?
Sure. Thanks for the additional time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question, I think I tried to explain it or ask it clearly. So we sell to really technical people, and our CS reps are ex-practitioners. They're product experts. They're industry experts. We sort of sell by industry. They offer a great deal to the sales cycle, but we sell a pretty low annual contract value product. So while CS reps can play a part in acquiring a new customer, especially a very technical customer, we don't compensate our CS reps on new business acquisition. So I guess, from a leadership standpoint, what is reasonable to expect of CS reps in a way that doesn't sort of piss them off or make them feel like their time is taken for granted?
Yeah, it's a good question. Typically my rule of thumb has been that it's actually, as long as it's late enough in the sales cycle where we feel fairly confident that they're going to become a customer, then bring them in to add that layer of expertise and also talk through what implementation looks like can be a value add for everybody involved, including the CSM, who has an opportunity to build a relationship even before the sale is fully closed. I think where that gets challenging is if that happens too early and CSMs are getting involved in a lot of deals that don't pan out, then they're going to feel like their time is not being used correctly. If it's simply a matter of expertise, things that I've done, and especially when I've managed both sales and customer success at the same time, is actually hold internal trainings for the CS team or a product expert or whomever to train the sales team on those key things. It's in the best interest of the company that as many client-facing stakeholders have that level of knowledge and expertise. If it's super technical, of course, you're not going to have everybody have that full breadth of technical knowledge and expertise. Another way to think about it is I think a lot of companies that have super technical products actually have what they'll call a solutions engineer or a solutions architect, that their whole job is actually to help salespeople close deals and be that technical expertise in that process. So if you're finding that every single deal requires this level of knowledge and this level of involvement, maybe creating a role like that to serve that purpose may make more sense. But if you're finding that it is late stage, you're able to have some level of confidence that the customer will convert. The way that I frame it to the CSM is it's sort of the pre-onboarding phase, and getting in early is going to ultimately help at the end of the day. This also goes back to creating strong trust between the teams. I think you'll have a lot of the CSM, this is a waste of my time, I'm not getting paid for this. But the root cause of that is there's a lack of alignment and trust between those teams. And if that exists, you don't usually get those types of complaints for that. I think we had an interesting question submitted beforehand, Judy, on product qualified leads, PQLs.
Which we both had to Google. But once I read the description, I do know what, let's see, Azar is talking about. Is he on today?
So I'm not sure he was able to make it, but why don't you read his question?
Yeah.
And then I know you had some thoughts, so why don't you jump in and I can add anything to the mix.
So the question is, what do you think about this product-led movement with customer onboarding? Specifically, how do you think you'll set up PQL? Why folks don't focus on PQL as much? I wish chat plus PQL plus demos could make a score that can help us understand the intent better. So yeah, I mean, I had to Google what a PQL was. I figured it was something qualified lead, but it's product qualified lead for anyone else that was not familiar with this new acronym. And actually, the company I was at before, Refine Labs, we used a lot of product intent data to prioritize and inform for our sales reps. We were working off of a free trial model where we had a 30-day free trial. And during that trial, there was a lot of key product indicators that we could use to determine how good that customer was going to be, and really if sales should put in the time to work them during the trial and focus on that conversion there. And there were some obvious ones like logging into the product and adding new users, but there were also, as a marketing software that I was working for, so there were some specific criteria around if a campaign had been created and if they were starting to run traffic through the campaign. There were some really like strong indicators they were going to be sticky after the trial and convert. I wouldn't necessarily say we set it up as a PQL model where we had like scoring around it, but we did use a software that integrated with both Salesforce, Marketo, and our product, and pushed basically custom data into fields in Salesforce that could be triggered off of through Marketo when XYZ value was populated in, and we could see that they were running traffic, or they had a new campaign set up, or they had logged in. There were certain notifications that went out to sales, specific emails that were triggered to the client. So I think there's a lot of really cool ways you can use product intent to, specifically in a freemium or a free trial model, to determine how good of a fit that potential client is going to be and how much time sales should invest into working to convert into paying. I'm curious though, Megan, as you hear me talk about this, Azar specifically mentioned onboarding, like with customer onboarding, and if there's anything in your experience where you've used product indicators to customize onboarding or to really smooth out the onboarding process because you know how they're engaging with product already.
Yeah, this whole topic is super interesting. And although I wasn't as familiar with the acronym, definitely familiar with this concept. And I think the way that I define it, or the way that I think about this, is if you're using some type of, freemium model, you hit some type of milestone, which becomes your like aha moment of, as a user of this product, I get it. I love it. It's doing what I want. This is great. That is the moment that I think signifies like the PQL, if you will. It's like you've been using this product long enough where you finally have gotten over that initial hump, and you believe in its value that it has. So Slack is super famous for this. They would say that like at the 2000th message, like they're in, and we just need to get them to start paying, right? Or I think Facebook, it was like your 7th friend you add, like you're hooked and you're a customer for life. So I think the first piece of it is, as a company, have you defined what your aha moment is for that product? And then I think when you think about customer onboarding or converting them from free to paid, usually maybe that's all rolled into one. Also acknowledging they've had some type of onboarding experience because they're using the product obviously to an extent. It's how can you leverage that aha moment and continue to build momentum off of that so that they continue to get value. I think that's really the trick. And once they're there, like what needs to happen to like bring them up to the next level? And I think whether it's adding a certain amount of value, expanding their use of the product, getting more people involved, it's going to vary business to business. But I think that's kind of how I look at this particular topic. And I think those are the types of considerations people should be thinking about if they're designing, onboarding accordingly. It's super interesting though, because I don't think a ton of companies actually do this very well, because I think they don't wait for, either they don't invest the amount of time to make a product that's so good that people will discover it on their own and get to that point, or they overinvest in sales from the beginning and just outbound and kind of force people onto it. I know Jess had a question, right? I think that was a good one. Is she still with us? Jess, the one you sent me beforehand. You remember it? Or you want Judy?
I have it here too, if you want me to read it out loud.
It was just now that your agency side, and you'll see more and more of like patterns and stuff that people are doing in terms of I guess things that people are doing wrong as far as customer success, or what patterns and things you've been noticing.
For that, yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think it validates the experience that I had at the different 5 companies that I've been at over the last 15 years. I think the function is always under invested in. It's sort of the last function to really be given the attention that it deserves. When you could argue that you should actually hire your first customer success person before you even hire your first salesperson. I think it's a lack of understanding of the complexity of what a customer journey is like, sort of what the customer is experiencing and how challenging it is to manage that customer through the life cycle and the process. I think it's the hand waving around product gaps that exist, and the CSM can just handle it. They can fix it. And, if the customer churns, it has nothing to do with everything else, but them. And I think all of this comes back to things that we've talked about on the show before, where I think it's just the mentality of like, go, 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 growth at all costs. Let's move really quickly, and not being really thoughtful about that. And it just boggles my mind, because if you get the customer experience right, if you invest in customer success, like that's how you actually build and grow a sustainable business. And I also think I think everyone agrees that alignment between marketing, sales, and success is important, but very few people actually achieve it. And it goes back to a lot of these basic things that people like nod their head like, yeah, that's really important, but then don't do the work to actually get that in place. So anyway, those are a few thoughts that come to mind.
It's funny because when I read that question, I actually interpreted it as like more on the demand gen side of things. What do you typically see clients doing wrong? So I have some thoughts on that if you're interested in hearing my perspective.
Jump in, Judy. Yeah, talk to us.
I'd just like to say this is a generalization, and not all of our clients are doing all of these things wrong, and some of these clients are doing these things really well. But like some trends I've noticed, there's really 3 common trends. I think the first one would be that a lot of clients come to Refine Labs and want to work with us and with Chris because they've heard about his philosophy, and they've found that the standard way of running demand gen, kind of some of the classic moves of gating ebooks and spending a lot on gated content, are not turning into revenue. So there's sort of that piece of it that's a common thread across our clients, looking for a new way to influence revenue and be smarter about their strategies there. But I'm also like consistently noticing some really interesting patterns, specifically around the back end operational side of things. The lead source is all over the place with clients. We're consistently noticing like bad data quality, lead sources that are a mix of channel and conversion point, multiple versions of the same lead source in data. This is like one example of a data point, but I'd say like the data quality component and being able to report on results from marketing channels is like almost always consistently an area where we can come in and quickly help a client straighten that out. Along that same vein is using UTM tracking, or really just tracking in general on any of their ad campaigns. I'm seeing a combination of 3 things. They're either using it and they're tagging all their links well, but they're not doing anything with that data. They're not analyzing it. They're not looking at it in GA. They're not pulling it into marketing automation or CRM and being able to report on that at any kind of, further down the funnel level. Or they're using UTMs, but incorrectly, maybe tagging everything with the same medium and not differentiating, or in Google Ads using the same tag for all keywords instead of customizing that based on searches. So small things there. Or they are not using it at all and completely missing out on the ability to track. So there's a lot of really interesting kind of operational things that I've noticed as trends across industries, across sizes of customers. It doesn't really seem to matter. There's a lot of that same pattern of, I guess I would just say messy data and messy processes.
No, those were awesome insights, Judy. Any follow-up questions for that? Oh, Matthew, do you have a system?
I'd like some of the common lead source things, and do you have a kind of like a go-to of like, this is how you should roll it all out?
Yes, I do. And it definitely depends on what marketing automation platform you're using. Like, for example, if you're using HubSpot, HubSpot comes with some default source fields, 3 in fact, that are auto-populated based on the HubSpot tracking script. And I recommend using those and then augmenting with a couple of custom source fields for your offline sources, so you can add more detail around what those offline sources are. If you use HubSpot, you know what I'm talking about with the offline sources. But if you're using another system, and my background is really heavily in Marketo, I recommend a 4 lead source field approach. You have 2 fields for lead source, one that's lead source at the high level, it's your channel, and one that's lead source detail, which is more around your conversion points. So be like Facebook driving demos versus LinkedIn driving demos, and you differentiate the channel and your lead source field, and you differentiate that conversion point in your lead source detail. But then because of the way that Marketo is set up and everything is very customized, I also like to add a lead source most recent and a lead source detail most recent. And you set up your field logic in the back end. So lead source and lead source detail can only be set once and won't be overwritten. And then lead source most recent and lead source detail most recent are updated on every form fill. And you build this logic in when you're setting up the logic in your programs. That way you're always capturing the original source, but every time that person engages with another marketing form or marketing activity, you're updating to get their most recent conversion point too. And then it ultimately gives you like a first touch, last touch model. I could go on about this for a long time, so I'm sorry if I'm talking faster. You can hear me getting excited about it.
Don't apologize. That was awesome.
Matthew says, all caps speak. Do you have a system for implementing that? What does that mean?
You were wondering if you should talk, so he was prompting you to speak earlier.
To that.
Yeah, he was encouraging you to use your voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought speak was like some new marketing acronym, and you were asking me if I know how to implement it. And I'm like, we don't need any more acronyms. There's enough. What were you asking me if I have a system for implementing though?
Oh, system for implementing basically what you were just talking about, like getting UTM parameters correct and basically conversion tracking properly. Even I know Julian, my coworker, sent a question about technical setup within the ads manager before even running. So things of that nature.
Yes, definitely. As I spend a lot of my time on a day-to-day basis dealing with these types of things for our clients. So from a UTM perspective, I have a specific template that I really like that I can definitely share with you outside of this. I didn't make it. I think Cardinal Path created it, but it's a tagging, basically shared Google spreadsheet that makes it really easy to track for a whole company what you're using consistently from a tagging perspective. So you can put all your source tags onto a tab, all your mediums, all your campaigns, and make sure everybody that's tagging any links is using the same values there. Because I think that's an area that I see people misstep a lot, is they use like 4 different variations of the same campaign, and then it just makes your reporting messy. From a like ads manager perspective and conversion tracking, like lots of different directions we could go with that. If you're using Tag Manager or how you're running your conversions, I think there's like so many different areas of nuanced questions around conversion tracking. But if you have anything more specific that I can dive into, I'm happy to. Ooh.
That was great, Judy. You rock. You are the demand gen in Demand Gen Live tonight. Your debut performance was awesome. I know that when Chris is here, we try to go as long as possible, 2 to 3 hours every week. But given that we're a holiday week, I wanted to just take a few minutes to wrap up with a little thanks, a little gratitude. I know this is a weird year. I hope you guys all have some version of Thanksgiving plans in the coming days. I love to cook, so like I've already made pie dough and focaccia dough today. Tomorrow is going to be a whole baking day, and then Thursday, I'm going to spend 8 hours cooking and sipping wine and be full by the time I serve dinner. It's going to be a great holiday. But seriously, thank you guys, especially our loyal friends that come every week, every Tuesday to chat with us and catch up and ask questions. Thank you for coming every week. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for all your great questions for me and Judy. None of this would work without all of you. And, you know, on behalf of Chris as well, he loves all of you guys. This is the highlight of his week. He's bummed that he can't be here tonight, but don't worry, he'll be back next Tuesday, which is December 1st. I can't believe this year is almost over. Crazy times, but, seriously, much gratitude to all of you. On a personal note, really appreciate you guys welcoming me into this, even though demand gen is not my primary area of expertise. We got some fun customer success talk tonight. Thanks, David, for the good questions, and Robert. But yeah, this was awesome. You guys are awesome. Chris will be back next week, and we'll pick things up as we go. Huge thanks to Judy. You rocked it out for your first Demand Gen Live appearance. We're definitely bringing you back in the future. Everyone wants your lead conversion UTM tracking playbook.
I sign myself up for an ebook. Great.
Exactly. I know. Got to make an ebook. We got to gate it on the FindLab site. Yeah. Collect some email addresses, you know, all that good stuff. Chris isn't here, so he can't get mad. No. Seriously though, thank you guys for everything, and have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here.